This program is brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana. Today's generation is born in a digital era, so technology and kids is a sight that is not uncommon. If you go to the mall, a toddler is holding a tablet, or if you visit a friend, their infant child is playing with an iPhone in their mouth. At some point, parents use these gadgets as a way to pacify their children and as an entertainment and educational tool. So what's new? Because technology and all of these gadgets are all around us. As we moved further and further into the digital era, technology also became important in education as it makes learning easier and more efficient. What is most important is that employers are also seeking tech-savvy individuals in their workplace. As much as it has become a normal part of life, the use of some of these gadgets by younger children especially has become alarming, according to some experts. With this, the American Academy of Pediatrics discouraged the use of technology by children under the age of 2, saying that it changes the nature of childhood. But what does this mean? And when can you, as a parent, introduce some of these gadgets to your children? We speak to child psychologist Dr. Layani Magwinja.
The nature of childhood. When we think about our own childhood, right? We grew up before tech. What was our childhood? What was it full of? It was full of playing, interaction. We were with our parents, with our cousins. We were with the environment, right? We were interacting. That is really what it is. With childhood, when we talk about development when it comes to children, especially younger than the age of 2, we need that interaction. We need that personal interaction, because that is what we want. That is how we want our children to grow up. That's how we want them to be raised, right? To be in environments that are going to be fulfilling, well-rounded, and where they're going to be able to get educated just from that interaction. So when we talk about screen time, right, and they with these gadgets, who are they interacting with? And who is interacting back at them, right? Whereas they are just looking at a screen. That is what they're doing. They're looking at a screen, and it's more of them interacting with the screen, but how much interaction are they getting back? So childhood is also playtime. Is your child playing when they're on screen time? No, they're just on this gadget. There is no playing. There is no fun. There is no, they're not learning anything, no social cues per se when it comes to their reality. As we know that most of the time when our children are watching screen time, it's not something that could be localized, for example, right? It's very commercial, very commercial stuff out there. So what are we giving to our kids?
Well, that being the case, we cannot deny, the benefits of introducing children to some of these gadgets, because they can be quite educational and, they can be very beneficial to their eventual employability. So when then is it the right time to introduce them to these gadgets, and maybe how?
I think that's the question. The question is, how do we introduce them? Because timing, we can't really say that there's a right time. When we have children that have disabilities, for example, sometimes we have to give them technologies because that's how they're going to be able to interact with us, right? So those assistive devices, for example, others may look at them as tech. It is tech, but that is what's assisting them to be able to develop. But if we're talking about our children who, don't necessarily need technology as part of their development, as part of their growth, the right time is going to be based on the how, right? How is it being introduced? What purpose is it being introduced for? So when we think about technology, most of the time we're giving our child our phone and they're going to be on the phone watching whatever they want to watch. Are you interacting with your child when they're on the screen? Are you actually seeing what they're watching, right? Did you plan what it is that they're watching? Or do you just have your child going on there, figuring out how to use YouTube? Next thing you know, they're watching wrestling. How did you know? How do you know what they're watching? How much are you actually monitoring what it is that they're watching on there? So it's more about the how and your level of engagement with your child when it comes to the use of tech. Because when your child is with you and you're engaging with them, then technology is actually being used in a more positive light, right? And it does have those benefits. Learning the ABC songs. And if you're a parent, you're on there with them. You're also singing the ABC song. You're also doing the Choo Choo Train song. You're doing good nights with them. You're doing all of that and you're engaging with them. So that interaction that they have, then it's not so much, they then don't get a dependency, right, for that, because they're interacting through it. So even if they don't have it, right, mom is here and she's still interacting with me. She can still do all those things. Or dad is here, right? Dad is showing me all these things, on there, and he's also doing it with me. So it creates that ability for them to also connect through a different space, because we do know that it's not always easy to have our kids off the tech, right? It really isn't easy for us to have the kids off the tech. But then how you introduce it to them, it's going to be really that. And the age, because I know it's tricky. I think any parent will say sometimes you're just in a car and you just need them to be quiet. So what are you going to do? You're going to give them the phone. You're going to give them the tablet, because you're just like, I'm not dealing with this. Or at home and you're really trying to get some work done. You don't want them to be coming to you, running to you, interrupting you. So what are you going to do? You're going to put on the TV. Next thing you know, it's 5 hours later. They've been stuck in front of the TV for 5 hours and you've been getting some work done. And we understand. We completely understand that happens and it's part of nature. But then at what point as a parent are you also going to be like, okay, I actually need to put my work aside and pay attention to my child. Let me actually see what they're watching. Because those 5 hours of them watching, what are they actually doing, right? So as much as it does have its benefits, those benefits only come when they're paired up with interaction, right? And them actually learning something educational from it.
Well, let us talk about those 5 hours, right? The issue of time, because maybe striking a balance between too much time and too little time, if there's such a thing, can be quite a challenge. So where is the sweet spot?
And that's a question. Where's the too much and where's the too little? What are they doing on the screen? For example, during our days of COVID, right? Not like they're not so long ago. And at that point, we relied on so much technology for our children because they were stuck at home. One of the main forms of entertainment for them, as well as education, was on TV. Children are learning through these programs. Children are interacting through these programs. But we needed them to be on them because you also needed your time. So it's honestly always based on what is actually happening in the environment at that point in time. But of course, we do need to have guidelines. So right now, as we are going back into our normality, we would always say 2 hours or less a day, right? And this is for older children. We, of course, don't recommend it so much when they're younger because it influences a lot of things. We gotta imagine they're now glasses for adults because they're on a computer for too long. So you now imagine putting a child in front of a screen for too long, right? Think about that damage. Their eyes as well, because their eyes in itself are also developing, right? So it's always about the consequences. So if I'm supposed to say like a time limit, how much time? And on weekends, we're obviously more liberal with our children, but do we not have other activities that we could engage them in, right, for them to be able to do? And, some parents will be like, okay, they only spend 2 hours on the TV, and then they spend 2 hours on the tablet, and then on my phone for another 2 hours. And I was like, that is all still screen time, right? We need other activities for our kids to do. Are they outside playing with other children if they're able to, right? Do they have bicycles? Do they have toys that they could be physically playing with outside? Because those interactions are just as important, if not more important for them to be able to develop and for them to grow, because that's how they learn their social skills. That's how they learn their social cues, when it comes to interacting with other people just alone. So there is such a thing as too much time, but I don't think there's such a thing as too little time, right? So definitely there is too much, and above that 2 hours we're really stretching it. We are stretching it because their brains need time to develop, to rest and all of that. But when they are watching too much, we start having issues, we start having behavioral issues, right? We start having a dependency that they have for these instruments because that is all that they're doing. And they know that when they're on it, no one is interrupting them, right? But as soon as your child is kicking and screaming and crying when you take a phone away from them, we may be developing a problem.
Maybe we could talk more on the issue of development, right? The kicking and the screaming and the behavioral issues by talking about some of the negative effects or consequences that we might see with prolonged screen time.
So, I mean, one of the most obvious ones, if a child is sitting in front of a screen all day and what they're doing is that they're eating and then they're just sitting there and then they're going to go put the plate down and that's the only movement, to go to the kitchen and come back, we're going to start talking about obesity, right? Because the child is not playing, right? They're not being active. They're not running around. They're not doing anything that's actually stimulating them physically, right? For them to be able to burn those calories. And for them to just grow up and just to be healthy, because our bodies actually do need us to be active for us to develop and for us to be able to grow. We start learning our spatial reasoning, and spatial abilities just by being able to move around. So imagine if a child is sitting there day in, day out, just watching TV and just eating all the time. And the only movement is to go sleep or, to go have a bath and to go collect their food. We start having issues. It's a lot. Even when we have kids that are at school all day, right? Your child is at school all day and, they're interacting with kids, they're interacting with teachers. But then they come home and then they're on the TV for the rest of the day. When are they interacting with you? We're still going to have those same issues, right? How do you get to know your child? That's when behavioral issues now start popping up. Because when you say to them, no more screen time, and they're kicking and they're screaming, what type of child are you trying to create, right? We want to give them so much, and there's so much instant gratification that we're trying to give to them. But what are we actually doing for our kids when we do that, right? We want to keep them quiet, but what are you doing? So obesity is one of the big ones that we have that is associated to too much screen time. Then we also have irregular sleep patterns, right? Because of your brain, how you use your brain. Your brain does need to rest, right? However, we all talk about that blue light, right? And the blue light effect that it has. It actually takes you longer for you to sleep. It takes you longer for your brain to get into that sleep mode for you to be able to get enough rest. So now we're going to start having irregular sleep problems. And what comes with irregular sleep problems? Irritability, right? You didn't get enough sleep. Waking up in the morning is, it's difficult. Children are kicking and screaming. They don't want to go to school in the morning because they're too tired. That's probably because they're watching TV a little bit too late at night. Right? And then we start having those behavioral problems that are going to start picking up. Also, depending on, are you actually watching what your child is watching, right? If you're not, and they're watching things that are violent, and things that are not so educational, and then they start picking up, because our kids will pick up whatever is fed to them. We need to realize that the children are sponges, right? They really are sponges, and they learn based on modeling, right? Based on imitating. They learn based on an array of things. So if we are giving them an environment that is consistently striving for them to be negative and for them to be violent, well, what's going to happen, right? They're going to end up there. Because right now we may be talking about just about watching screens. Then there comes the age where they start playing video games, right? And they want these video games. Are we regulating them? How much screen time are we saying that our kids should be on them? And look, on weekends we get it. On weekends mom has gone out to run errands. Child wakes up, it's 8 a.m., mom is not home. When you come back home at noon, they're still in their pajamas and they're still playing video games, right? And it's one of those things like, okay, but as soon as you get home, but it's also healthy for you as a parent. It is so healthy for you as a parent to play with your child. It's one of those things that is going to grow your bond with your child, but also actually helps you relax, right? Because you have to go back into that child mode. And going back into your child mode is something that's absolutely beautiful, So it's just really one of those things that we need to be conscious about, because the negative effects are ones that can run for a very long time, right? Sleep problems are one of the ones that we see the most, where parents would come to me and they'd be like, this child hardly sleeps. Or, always angry in the morning and very irritable. As soon as they come back from school and they're not watching TV, they just get depressive and they're in their rooms and they're not doing anything, right? Or they're actually just sleeping, maybe even, because they may be trying to catch up on sleep. But what are they doing that's productive? What are they actually doing that is productive, right? We want our children to rest. Rest does not mean screen time. Rest means actually resting, taking a nap, or reading a book, And it's more so, that's more linked to our cognitive development. Children are growing consistently. They are growing consistently. We obviously have gaps where our cognitive development is way more, right? We need to focus on it. But those are the ages that we find that, like when they're teenagers, their cognitive development is actually growing quite a bit because they're becoming quite advanced, as much as when they're younger, right? When in that middle childhood phase. But we are finding that those kids that are more on screen, we're having more issues academically now. Yeah. We're having academic issues, right? Because the concentration levels are also not that high. And it's so easy for us to rush and want to diagnose with, ADHD or ADD, but it's not necessarily that. Sometimes it's about the structure and the environment that the child is in.